So to begin with, could you just tell us a little bit about the work that is in the exhibition Growing Like a Tree and sort of where it comes from?
The installation that I've contributed to the show was basically called Oral Mirror. The idea of it came at in a changing room booth. To be quite honest, when you have all these mirrors facing each other, the image sort of gets abstracted into like smaller and smaller images until it's infinite in a sense. I wanted to do this similar sort of thing with sound, particularly with sound, because it came at a point in life where I was going through a lot and I couldn't recognize myself in a way in the mirror. So it sort of became even more important for me to sort of get a sense of who am I, who is asking this question, when a child is facing the mirror for the first time, which brought me to like Jacques Lacan's theory about like the mirror stage, where it's the first instance where a human being or a child realizes that it is not just a pair of hands, not just a pair of noises that are coming around, but an entire object. And to get a full view of the object in front of you makes you realize that you're an accumulation of all these senses. So oral mirror sort of came as an amalgamation to make sense of being and what it meant to be within time, within sound. So the whole idea is when you walk into the installation, it picks up the ambient noises and it plays it back to you. And it's a sort of a feedback loop that's generated within the installation and played back to you. So while you can't hear like distinct sounds within the ambience, you can hear the sustained drone of it, making you, it's a play between presence and absence. And I think the voice does it like brilliantly, because it's at once within you and then the next second it's outside of you. So sort of trying to make sense of subjectivity as well as dissolve it, so it was sort of like this playful experiment.
I've been talking to Saurabh about the show, and even in his essay, he kind of uh, builds on the premise of this network and a way of practicing that is kind of embedded within a community. I was wondering sort of where you saw your own work and which other works in the show you saw it speaking to, and also sort of how you arrived at showing this with Saurabh, just what your process was.
The moment Saurabh came across the work, he picked up this work because he's brilliant. He knows exactly what will work with the other artists' works. And I completely trust his decision on it. And to him and to me, it made a lot of sense having this work, having, the sort of ambience the work provides that lends to each and every other artist's works. Like I haven't met any of the artists before, and it was kind of interesting the way Sorab was speaking about every one of their practices, giving me glimpses, like little windows into like who they are, what their work is about. And he sort of thought like the sound, the whole ambience that it would provide to the whole exhibition on the whole would be interesting.
He also described that your sort of engagement with sound emerges from a place of therapy and a place of kind of looking inwards. If you could elaborate on that a little bit.
So I also work as a sound therapist, which was, I mean, I've always been curious about sound. Sounds, I mean, not just music, or which is organized sound, and sounds that is extra language. So I got interested in it while I was quite young, actually. Like while growing up, my dad used to play these whale sounds, and we always had Indian classical and Western classical music going on in the background. And as I went along, I had generated my own sense of musicality, but it was always these extra sounds, the sound of noise, that always interested me. So that was like the sort of starting point. And the idea of affect of sound is something that what my research is about, and how it molds us and into beings. I conducted like these little experiments with colleagues who worked with EMI readings, and we sort of were studying this brainwave states of people who were undergoing these therapy sessions. And like a lot of the readings showed that while the person said that they were completely like awake and alert, the brainwave sort of reading showed us that they were actually in deep sleep, during that session. So approaching it from a medicinal sort of therapy point of view was something I was really, apprehensive about. But it sort of started coming together, and I'm still working on it. But like sounds, it's got this huge invisible agency to it, which we sort of undermine, and it's sort of always affecting us and the way we navigate our cities, our landscapes. We say that it's a part of the communication, but it's almost like 70% of communication, more than the words you're using, more than the language you're using. While we might say that noise is a waste of signal, it's actually an overabundance of signal in that sense, having bringing back the viewer always to listening to the listener. It's always about the listener at the end of the day, because we have eyelids, we don't have earlids, so we're
Right.
always immersed in sound.
So much of the show is centered around photography, and also a lot of the work is extremely representational, right? And photography and film themselves are like inherently representational media. So it's very interesting that your work sits there in between as a kind of like inviting the presence of the viewer in some way.
I mean, the viewer always completes the artwork, and in a sense, just as photography does, so does my installation. Without the audience member, there wouldn't be someone watching the work, neither would the work be watching back at someone. So it's kind of a circuit that completes the whole experience of viewing something.
And this idea of representation, like, I don't know if you've kind of thought about this or if you've always sort of steered away from it in your own practice. And like how, when you're sort of making work through the medium of sound, where does that play in? Because like so much of art is representational in whatever way. I'm wondering if you see sound as doing that as well, or the work that you make.
I'm not trying to represent, but I think in a way I'm trying to generate an experience that reflects back to the audience, and makes them an essential part of the circuitry of an experience, essentially. Because like most of my works, I mean all of my works are interactive in a sense. And I think even if it's like, even if it's an image, it's still an interactive thing, because people come in with their own subjectivity and their own level of understanding. But having said that, certain sounds are representative. They're like cultural signifiers. Our sense of listening is our primal sense, and that is so deeply genetically encoded within us. So the moment we hear a lion roar, that is instilling a sense of fear into us, right? So yes, there are a couple of times when there are representational sounds within the work, but it's always what it means for the viewer, or the listener rather. Like, when you talk about representation, like initially, the initial few times that I did exhibit this piece, it was in a small little room. The first one was in complete darkness. The whole experience for every single viewer was different, and I was within the first 2 days of it opening, I was asked to like switch the lights on in the place, because a lot of people found it overwhelming. So because we listen to not just via our ears, we also listen tactically through our skin. So it does induce a sense of awareness, and that brings into question alertness, and especially taking vision away induces a lot of anxiety in people. So these sort of sensory overlaps are also quite interesting within my work. I try to play around with them quite often because I find them interesting. Then there's like the normal, like people going in, making loud sounds, having fun with it, because there's also a certain sense of fun in listening to your own voice. I notice that a lot. People do that a lot. And this is the first time it's in a huge room. So I was kind of curious to experience it, because it's never been in a space that's open.